Hello, and welcome to Yale Divinity School's Transformational Leadership in a Turbulent Time video series. My name is Jonathan Lee. I'm a student at Yale Divinity School, and today I am talking with Pastor Gabby Cudjoe Wilkes. Pastor Gabby works at the intersection of faith, culture, leadership, and strategy. She travels the country as a public speaker and strategist, working with individuals and institutions to dream strategically about the impact they wish to leave on the world. Her work centers storytelling, prophetic imagination, and design thinking as key tools for maximum impact. Pastor Gabby is also the co-founding, co-lead pastor of the Double Love Experience in Brooklyn, New York. Before launching her church, she served on the pastoral staff of New York City megachurch, the Greater Allen Cathedral of New York, for 5 years as co-young adult pastor. Prior to congregational ministry, Pastor Gabby worked as a publicist in the gospel music industry for 10 years. She has been featured in Forbes, Yahoo News, and Essence, and is a proud graduate of Hampton University, New York University, and our very own Yale Divinity School, where she currently serves on the alumni board. At present, she is in the final coursework of doctoral study at Duke Divinity School. Pastor Gabby, thank you so much for joining us and for agreeing to be a part of this video series. I am so glad and honored to be the one talking to you today.
I'm so excited. I love Yale, and I'm so great to meet you, Jonathan, and it's an honor to be with you in conversation today.
Great. So to open off our conversation, I know I just gave a mile-high biography about who you are and the work that you've done, but I was wondering if you could give us your story in your own words. Give us another kind of brief, overarching story of who you are and how you arrived at the Double Love Experience, the church that you are currently a part of.
Yeah, sure. So hey, everybody. I am a proud YDS alum. I love Yale. I went to Yale at a very formative time in my life when I was making decisions about whether I wanted to do pastoral ministry, whether I wanted to do ministry in the public square, and Yale just came alongside me. And I have to give a special shout out of gratitude and love to Dean Bill Gettler, who from my first semester was just in my corner and helping me figure all these things out and answering all of the many questions that I had. So everybody loves Bill, but just want to thank him. So I'm a PK, preacher's kid. I'm a PK of a woman pastor, which in the South matters. I'm from Dallas. And so had a unique upbringing with, my mother was an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. She was also the first woman chaplain, university chaplain at Paul Quinn College in Dallas, Texas. And just, she holds a lot of firsts, right? So I'm the daughter of someone who was the first in a lot of things. She was the first person in our family to go to college, first person to occupy all these different roles. And so in many ways, my identity is very much connected to my upbringing, being a girl child, as they say in African culture, really watching and being a very quiet child. I watched and absorbed a lot. I saw a lot of discrimination that my mom had to go through as a female minister. I saw a lot of sexism. I saw a lot of that. And I also saw a lot of great things. I saw when she was hitting her stride and really finding congregations that loved her for her gifts and her talents. So I've been in church all my life. My mother, literally, they tell the story that my mother was preaching her trial sermon when I was under 2 years old, and I ran up to the pulpit. So like, fast forward 33 years, and voila, here I am, like intentionally in the pulpit. So maybe it was destined to be, I don't know. But I was a quintessential church baby. Like, we were always at church. My mother worked at the church, all that. So church has never been foreign to me. It's always been a big part of my identity and my culture. The Black church in particular, the Black church universal. And I say universal because when I got to YDS, they kept asking me pesky questions like, what's your denomination? And I was like, you would be surprised how complicated that answer is for me, because I've been a part of Black Baptist churches, Black UMC churches, Black AME churches, non-denominational churches. And I'm currently in the pathway of a UCC, formation. So it's like, that question of denomination was so not easy for me. But the Black church universal is my like mothership. right? Like there are just some things that, regardless of denomination, across the sector, our culture feeds into our church experiences. So fast forward to how I became a church planter. Well, when I moved to New York, I moved to New York to go to graduate school. To do my master's in music business at NYU. And I was looking for a church home because I'm a good church girl. And so even though I was living in New York, I was like, I need a church. But I was really busy with what I was doing in the music industry. I was working at a record label and like long hours and all that. And so I found a church that actually had a Bible study on Friday nights. And to most New Yorkers who are 21, that would be a deterrent. But for me, where every other day of the week I was working and going to shows and going to concerts and loving it. I was loving that. I'm not going to make it seem like it was work. I loved it. It was like, is this work? Like I'll do all of this. But I still had that. I had that hunger for being spiritually fed. So that Friday night slot worked for me because it was like at 7:00. Any show that I was going to didn't start till like 11, you know? So I started going there just to go to Bible study. And they found out that I was at NYU, and you know how church does. They were like, oh, well, if you do this, can you do this for us? And they roped me in to plan one of their New Year's Eve parties. And like the rest is history. Like they roped me in and I loved it. It was a mega church. So even though it was church, they had a budget that could support some of my dreams. So I got to kind of, play and do what I wanted to do and plan the event the way I wanted to plan it. And it made an impact. And so fast forward 5 years later, when the young adult pastor moved on to be a senior pastor, I got pulled in to be the co-young adult pastor. And that was really my entrance to ministry, congregational ministry. I always defined what I did before that as ministry because I worked with gospel music artists and I really saw that as ministry. But I was like, well, I don't preach or teach. I just, I like to spread the good news of Christ, but I don't do that in the pulpit. That's what my mom does, But, I got roped in, the call was definitely deep within me. And that opportunity was a great one. I mean, I got thrown into the deep end. I started working as a clergy person at a really well-established, well-respected, well-resourced church. And so I started with a salary. I started with things that a lot of folks wait years to get, and I'm grateful for that. And so it really accelerated my growth, my career. And so by the time I got to YDS, I was 2 years into that appointment and 2 years into a 5-year appointment. And I was just hungry for really being able to refine and put all my identities together. And so by the time I graduated YDS, my time at that church had come to an end. Before I graduated, it came to an end. It came to end January of my last semester. And I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? And, church planting became the work that I threw myself into. And so the August after I graduated YDS, my husband and I started our church. The August we launched our first worship service in October after graduation. But August of 2018 is when we first brought our launch team around the table, and people said yes. And they said, we'll dream with you and we'll build. It's like asking somebody to marry you. Like, will you plan a church with me? The whole thing. Right. And we've been on that ride ever since.
Wonderful. So this church amusement park ride, this roller coaster is called the Double Love Experience.
I like that.
Right. All the ups and downs and the flips and turns that you go along with it, and the screaming, I'm sure.
Yes.
So the Double Love Experience, can you tell me, how does this church, you call it a church plant, how does it stand out from other churches that you have been a part of, either, as a worshiping member of, or as a leader? How does it stand out?
It's kind of all the things I love about church in one place. So I am a music head. I love good music. I love skillful musicians. I've always been in congregations where our musicians were like on the road playing for celebrities. So I have a really like high standard of what good music sounds like. So I was able to bring that into this place from the beginning, just our network, my network of musicians is they're great. The singers are great. So from the beginning, we had a sound that really got me excited about being in the sanctuary. And so I love that. So, a core music ministry is a big part of it. The other thing that I am really drawn to is a church that is connected to the culture. If there's something that happens in the news that's really major and dire, and I don't hear about it on that Sunday, in any church that I'm in, I'm concerned, right?
Mm.
And so with this, there's a push there. I mean, there are some Saturday nights where I've thrown away sermons that I was supposed to preach because something hit the news, But I remember back in 2013 when the Trayvon Martin verdict came out, where George Zimmerman was not convicted, and it was on a Saturday. And I remember it was on a Saturday because I happened to be in Miami that weekend and we were trying to go out. And when the verdict came in, me and my friends were like, being Black in Florida tonight might not be the move. And so we like ordered in and all that. But that's how I know it was a Saturday night, because we were like ready to go out and we were like, actually, never mind. But but I remember the next day, right? I remember the next day. So many Black congregations drew a line in the sand on that day without even realizing it, because there were the churches that preached about it and the churches that didn't. There were the pastors that went back to their manuscript and went back to the lectionary or whatever and said, I've got to preach about this. And there were the pastors who were like, I've already written my sermon. Maybe I'll mention it, but I'm done preparing for today, right? And on that Monday, I kid you not, I think it was Time Online ran just kind of a series of clergy who had covered it, and those people's ministries catapulted, right? And they didn't catapult because, oh my gosh, their sermons are so brilliant, maybe, but it was more so about, here are some clergy who are tapped in enough to the pain and the pathos of this moment and willing to risk putting some sort of theological undergirding around it to help people make sense of this. Right. So at our best, I think that's what church does. And so that's something that, is a part of what I've tried to bring. And so, case in point, January 6th, insurrection. I'd already written my sermon for that week. I'd already preached it because we were in pre-record mode. It was done. Had to go back in to our sanctuary, which we don't own, by the way. So I had to get permission to get in on a day that's not ours, find my video person, find my audio tech, all of whom are freelancers with us because we're still a church plant. So they're not salaried with us. So their day to work with us is Sunday. Apart from that, anything else is a special ask. And if you anybody who listen, if you work at Marquand, you know that if you try to get audio on the day that they're not supposed to have audio, it's a problem, right? So fast forward that to New York culture in a pandemic, in a building you don't own, right? That was my situation on January 6th. But on the 7th, I was in my sanctuary pre-recording the sermon that would run that Sunday because it mattered that much, right? So bringing in that was, that was important to me. The clergy that I had seen stand up in those moments mattered to me. Going back to the civil rights movement. I mean, I tell people all the time, most Black churches did not support MLK's work. They thought he was too radical. They thought he was putting them in harm's way, right? So when you look at history, it's easy now to say, well, how could you all have done that? But look at right now and look at the churches that are willing to be vocal about everything that's pick a thing, right? There's so many things going on right now in our nation, but there are still so many churches who are silent. So that was important to us. Certainly important to have a commitment of love and justice where people can see and feel that. Important to affirm our heritage. So our mantra is, we are a Jesus movement committed to Black lives. That has been a part of our vision statement since our inception, but it took on new meaning summer of 2020 when everybody was trying to decide in the pandemic, would I still be in the streets because of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Tony McDade and all the other killings, right? And so that took on more meaning. So absolutely taking on that kind of Black heritage, Black power that I love, right? Like, I'm fully Christian and I'm fully Black, right? And people will deal. And giving my members the ability to not feel like they have to pick and choose if the church is in the streets or if the streets are in the church. How about you're both? Because the people are the church. And so if you happen to be in the streets, you're the church. And if you happen to be in the church, like, the streets came with you. You know what I mean? So just that blending of it all. My husband has a background in public policy. He's finishing up his PhD in political science right now. He's in his ABD stage. Shout out to Andrew. And so he brings a wealth of political knowledge. I still have, that music and culture background from when I worked in entertainment. I used to work for BT and work for record labels and have that have that world in my head. So I usually have a pulse on what the culture is going through. And so we try to bring all of that into the space. And it's fun, right? The one thing about a church plant, it's hard work, yes, but it's also like all of your biggest dreams, just throw them on a wall and see what sticks. People don't have a history of what you're supposed to do, what we've always done, right? So you get to try stuff out. So, at our best, I think we are a church that blends, music, culture, justice, theological formation, being in touch with the culture, and giving people an opportunity to just bring their full selves to the space.
I really like that, man. I wish I could be a part of the community. Maybe I'll just tune in.
Listen, in a pandemic, everyone can be a part because we're virtual.
Well, I'm really struck by what you're talking about. Well, first of all, you're talking about how, about coming to YDS and getting that denomination question, and I resonate so much with that because I grew up in a Korean church.
I understand it, but I loathed it when I was a seminarian.
I grew up in a Korean church, and that's I think a similar thing where there's this top-down cultural model, and then you get the denominational nuances in there. And I grew up bouncing around, and getting that question here is that same I'm like a part of this community, but I'm not a part of this community. And hearing what you're talking about, this church that's connected to the world, and like that's one of my things that I wish the Korean church would do more of. Like, I remember growing up and going to Sunday services and the pastor not touching about like what happened that week before. And to hear your church doing it, I'll just have to tune in on Sunday, I suppose. This is recorded on a weekday for those watching. So I'll have to turn in on the next Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah. So and you mentioned your vision statements, which is one thing that I really when I was researching the Double Love experience and researching you for this interview, one thing that I really grabbed onto. Let me read it really quickly for the people who don't have it, and then ask you a few questions. So the Double Love experience vision is that we envision a Jesus movement committed to Black lives, an equitable political economy for all God's creation, and a spirit-led mysticism that prioritizes personal and public health. The prophet Micah's enduring words function as our centering image, a radical assembly of believers striving to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. So what I loved about it was how particular it is. You in your first line, it is a Jesus movement committed to Black lives, but then you follow that up with that you're also envisioning an equitable political economy for all God's creation, and then going on to the words of the prophet Micah, a radical assembly of believers. So you're doing the particular work, but you're also doing the big overarching kind of evangelizing gospel work. So my question is, what was that vision like at the beginning? Was it always that kind of particular and large scope? And how has it evolved in the I suppose just over 2 years that Double Love experience has been going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So we it has been the same. We've not changed it. I think the particular is important, especially for minorities, because we often get lost in the majority, right? So you kind of have this color blindwashing. There's a song, it doesn't matter what color you are as long as your blood was red, that Kirk Franklin and a bunch of other folks did about a decade ago. And I understand the sentiment means, regardless of our backgrounds, Christ died for us all. But those kinds of songs and messages, and I love Kirk, but those kinds of songs and messages can sometimes send a message to non-white Christians that you need to kind of morph into this kind of Christianity that doesn't take into consideration the socio-political economic struggles that your race has to live through, that we very much bring to our faith, right? As a Black American, I can't bring to my faith, an experience that's separated from the experience of my ancestors who were enslaved, right? Who found the way to make the Bible a liberation gospel for themselves in the midst of being enslaved, where their white slave owners were tearing out parts of the Bible that would help them find their own oppression. Mm-hmm. right? That would keep them in their own oppression, tearing out parts that would help them find their own liberation, right? And so I don't come to Christianity as a clean slate, because it's actually Christianity that was often used to oppress my people, right? So I can't just, I don't get to just wash that off, right? And the KKK members who are also church school folks, and Bull Connor, who also, you know what I mean? So that is just a part of American history, and I say that as a Black American, right? Because the diaspora, there are Black folks who identify as Black who perhaps are from the continent of Africa, who are from the Caribbean, who have a different history. But as a Black American, that's my history. Right. And so when anytime a Black American decides to be Christian, it is a very intentional decision. Like, we take it for granted now because so many Black folks are Christian, but it's a very intentional decision that took a lot of sorting through. How do I sort through the part of this religion that oppressed me? And how do I locate the part of it that liberated me? And where is God in all of that? And what is God doing by way of accountability with those who have misused, what's in the text, right? And that goes on until 2021. I mean, we go back to the insurrection, we see Jesus save signs and all of that at the same time, right? So there's a whole lot, just mixed into that. So it was very important for us when we launched our church to be an intentional space that serves the needs of Black folks. And the reason for that is because so many congregations want you to check that at the door, including some Black spaces. You have Black clergy that are trained in white schools like me. We have to work overtime to decolonize our own theological education. Right. So it's very important to us to be intentional, to be particular, so that, keep it honest, thinking folks would feel like they could be in a space that was also thinking and doing the hard work and sitting with the hard questions that sometimes don't have answers. There are many times where folks come into the space and they're just like, yeah, I don't know if I can get with that, because it's like, I hear you. I see how you got there, right? So that intentionality is necessary for us. And then the latter part, I think it can't stop there, right? Like, we're called to the work of showing up in the world, period, right? And so political economy for all God's creation, really wanting to create a climate where we don't need as many exceptional people to do well, right? Right? Like growing up, we always heard about the exceptions. We always heard about, the brilliant ones who went to Harvard and Yale and, somehow, then landed this amazing job and da-da-da-da-da. We hear about, the elites or the famous one. There are always these exceptions, right? Like the ones that kind of break the mold that, all minority communities hold up, which is great. But wouldn't it be wonderful to have like a world where like it's just normative for people to be able to get what they need? Yeah. And to live in a way that like their needs are met, where they can actually dream, right? Because that's the other part of it too, right? When people's needs aren't met, they can't dream. So a lot of dreamers have a particular archetype, right? Like there's a way that people who dream, have typically been set up financially, or professionally, because not all resources are financial, right? So sometimes just having access to people you can call for help if your dream doesn't work out is a privilege that a lot of folks don't have, right? Just the fact that like, I'm gonna throw all my eggs in this basket of double love, but if it doesn't work out, somebody will hire me. I know that. I have enough relationships that I've built over the past 10 or 12 years that if double love fails, and I pray it doesn't, but if it fails and I need to put food on my table, some pastor somewhere will slide me a check to do some work. That's privilege, right? I may not have the financial undergirding that I need to say, if this fails, I can just live off of, this excess, savings that I've been able to pull. Because that's not true, right? I put every church planners, we put all of our dimes in the church. So that's not true. But I do have a certain level of access and privilege, right? Because of the relationships that being a graduate of YDS affords, being a former clergy person of a large church affords, being connected in a particular way, doing interviews like this where somebody may see it and be curious about double love. You know what I mean? Though that's privilege that we cannot undervalue. And so, creating an equitable economy for all God's creation means all of God's creation deserves access to the things that I've been able to stumble my way into. Right. But everyone deserves that. And so the work of the church should be really trying to level that playing field. And we think that's important. And then just spirit-led mysticism, like, spirit moves. I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit. I know this is YDS, but I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit. And when you think about mystics, the mystic that I think about almost instantly when I think about mystics is Howard Thurman. Howard Thurman was a mystic. Howard Thurman, really believed in the movement of the spirit and was spirit led, right? And so that's that part of our vision statement that makes space for the stuff we can't quantify, the stuff we can't quite plan for, the stuff we can't take credit for. But it happened because we were willing to be moved by a spirit led mysticism, a spirit led kind of, I can't explain to you why, but I know this is the direction we're going in, right? Those spirit moments, those moments of internal certainty that you can't express, that peace that surpasses all understanding, as scripture says. So yeah, that's and again, it's a vision statement. This is our vision. This is what we would like to see happen. Do we always get it right? Absolutely not. But it's what we're envisioning.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that. Holding on to the spirit, because that's what gives you these unexpected moments. So do you mind sharing an example of an unplanned, unexpected moment?
Yeah. Gosh, there are so many. Becoming a church planter is an unplanned, unexpected moment.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, no, for real. I honestly, there is a YDS connection to my work as a church planter. When I was at YDS, I was my second year, I was Yale Black Seminarians president, and one of the former YBS presidents came to campus. He was recruiting students. His name is Reverend Tony Campbell, amazing man. And he was like looking for Black and brown church planters for his denomination. And we got into a really good conversation. And before I knew it, I was applying to be a church planter with him. That's a spirit-led moment, because I was not thinking church planting. I was like, I was trying to think what's happening after divinity school. I was not thinking planting the church, because to me, that was just like, work. Like, I don't mind. I'm a hard worker. Anybody knows me knows that I'm a hard worker, but church planting is a different kind of work. And it's really interesting. Regrettably, he passed away. By the end of that academic year, he had passed away. And so I only got about 6 months with him, but I probably spoke to him once a week, maybe, once every 2 weeks, for about 3 months, after I had gotten into the kind of church planting process with him. And he really left an indelible impact on my life. And I really don't believe I would have had the courage to go forth with the church plant without someone like him, really mentoring me, very, very short period of time, but mentoring me nonetheless. That's a spirit moment. It is like, it wasn't in my headspace. I didn't know Reverend Campbell at all. I only connected with him because of my duty, my post at YDS, like, host this person. If you're over a student organization, if an alum wants to connect in a way, you avail yourself. And, 2 years later, 2.5 years, well, he passed away in 2016. So several years later, the work has come to pass. That's a spirit-led moment. That was unexpected.
Unexpected and unplanned.
And
it's turned out divine. Pretty well. Right.
Yeah. So divine. So definitely a lot of the work that I do, much of it is absolutely in his honor. So
sure. Well, we're thankful for his honor, for getting you to where you are right now. So my next question. So as you said, you grew up in the church. You were doing not necessarily from the pulpit ministry, but you were still working, in the gospel music industry and stuff like that. So you've been involved in some kind of church leadership or ministry in whatever form that you want to talk, you want to define it, for a long time. I was wondering what about ministry continues to surprise you, and in what ways are you still learning about ministry as you're as you're doing it day in and day out?
You said what continues to surprise me?
Yeah. What are you learning basically?
That people keep tuning in / showing up. That is a surprise. I'm trying to tell you, every time I do anything, I'm just like, well, look at this. The people are here. Because it's never again. So that's a pretty simple, but it's true. You can't take for granted that people are being ministered to, that they feel seen, heard, valued, especially in the world of a pandemic where what we're going on, March is almost here. It's almost a year of virtual only, right? So, I mean, to have anybody still rocking with you, when they really haven't been able to put arms around you and embrace you, that's surprising. That's really surprising. I think the other surprising thing is just how resourceful clergy can be. Because, there are certainly clergy that are well-resourced, but most of us aren't. And the ways in which, I think about this with like teachers and educators as well, just the ways in which, folks who are in these kinds of leadership roles, who they themselves have a significant number of needs, are able to just show up for those that they serve regardless, right? And figure the other stuff out later. I think that continues to surprise me. There continues to be a wow factor there at the dedication, at the commitment of so many of my colleagues. And, there's beauty in that, right? I mean, obviously, again, equitable economy. We want everybody to be able to make it without having to struggle. But there's beauty in folks who take it seriously enough to say, even if I'm personally struggling, I'm still going to show up for my community and, those teachers who buy markers and, all the other stuff that the school board didn't have money for. I think it's a continual, beautiful surprise at just humanity and how people who are in serving and helping professions really give so much of themselves to the work.
Right. It's funny that you say, surprised that people show up and knock Bill and his vision for these videos. But I think when the first round of these came out in the fall, I saw some of the views, I was like, oh, people are watching these. And
exactly.
So if you're watching this video, exactly, you made it this far. Thank you so much for watching. We'll just put that in the middle right here.
Shout out to you all for watching and staying with us. We appreciate it.
Like and subscribe, as they say.
There it
is. I would love to hear more about your time as a music publicist, because you're saying you worked with BET and you're featured in all these different places, and you're doing it for what it sounds like to be a good chunk of time. Yeah. So can you just tell me a little bit more about like what led you to doing gospel music publishing? And looking back, you mentioned that it was you developed a skill set that kind of pushed that when church leaders found out, they immediately were like, we can use that. Yeah. So there's obviously a very clear road there, but can you tell us more about what skills and experiences were you able to cultivate as a music producer, publisher, or someone in that world?
Publicist, for sure. So I think, well, first of all, the way that I got into publicity is I just love spreading the word about music that I like, period. That's just something I love. And so when I was in college, I went to an HBCU. I'm a graduate of Hampton University. And I originally wanted to be a marketing major, but I really didn't like math. And I wasn't the best at it. Like I had done like calculus and all of that in high school because I was in a magnet school and they required us to do it, but I struggled. Like I did it because I had to, but it was a struggle. And so, when I got to college, I wanted to be a marketing major, and I was talking to one of my professors in college, and, she was just like, well, you're a really good public speaker. You're a great writer. And she was like, those are strengths in PR. And she was like, in marketing, it's much more math-based, right? But she was like, in public relations, it's much more based on, communication skills. And so once I understood that the difference in that, I began to start researching publicity firms as opposed to marketing firms, which are night and day, right? Marketing firms run almost like accounting firms. They're very very particular how they do what they do. Publicity is particular in a different way, right? So the best example I can give in terms of the distinction is marketing. You have a marketing budget, you have a certain amount of money, you pay for ads, you pay for space to market what you're doing. Let's take a magazine. There's a magazine you love. Let's say, let's say Vogue. If you have a marketing budget, you can acquire space in Vogue if you have a large enough budget, and marketing gurus will figure out, does it even make sense? Is it worth the investment, et cetera, et cetera. Publicity, you cannot pay, technically. You cannot pay for a feature, for an interview with Vogue, right? You have to influence them that whomever your client is worth being interviewed, right? So the skills for publicity are more coercive, for lack of better words. They're more, let me prove to you why this client matters, right? And so publicists do the work of getting folks on TV for, television interviews, magazines, et cetera, radio, fast forward to now, reality show appearances, all that kind of stuff. That's publicity.
Sure.
Marketing is like, here's my budget. Here's like a brilliant way to like put some money here with Facebook, put some money here and marketing goes very closely to advertising, right? So the reason why that skill set is so appealing is because most churches don't have a budget. So they're like, oh, well, if you're used to like persuading people without money to take a chance on somebody, we need that, right? That's every church is like, oh yeah, give me some of that, So that's how it maps on. But in terms of just my skill sets, it ended up being a blessing for me because a lot of the work that I do with Double Love, in terms of getting our name out there. So apart from like my pastoral hat where I'm preaching, teaching, doing ministry, but in terms of just like simple stuff like a website, social media pages, connecting with folks that are like-minded, that might see DLE as an option that resonates for them, packaging stuff. There's so many folks who like do amazing things, but if you don't have like a video recap or something that kind of shows you were there, it only impacts the people that were present, right? So all those kinds of skill sets are things that I had to build up when I was doing publicity, that now I'm able to use not only for other folks, but for my own church, which is great. So yeah, that's the tie-in, just being able to really make a case for your why. That's in a nutshell, that's publicity. We're always making a case for why. Why this client deserves to be in this space, why your audience needs to hear about this person, why people will be impacted if they experience, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And I mean, really what you're doing from behind the pulpit is a publicity work, why you're convincing the viewers why they need to believe.
That's good, Jonathan. I like that.
Yep.
That's good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Brief aside, you mentioned at the beginning, you love music, you love sharing. Can you give us a snapshot? What are you listening to? Things that we should be, what are things that we should be on the lookout for?
Ooh,
things in your playlist. Let's
what's on my playlist?
Brief aside right now. Yeah.
Okay, this is good. So right now I'm listening to, I love this question. First of all, I'm a big R&B lover, so I'm really into her, the artist.
Okay, yep.
Her. I love her music. Not to confuse people, her artist name is her. But definitely really into her right now. I love NPR Tiny Desk. That is a suggestion of mine. If you love music, just put in NPR Tiny Desk, and all of these artists from different genres, they do these 20-minute concerts in the office, and you can like stumble across so many amazing artists in that way. So, NPR Tiny Desk, I'm a huge fan of that. Jasmine Sullivan just released an NPR Tiny Desk performance, and it's wonderful. It made me feel like I was out at a live music venue, even though I was sitting in my house watching my television. So that's great. And then in terms of like gospel music, because obviously like I'm always looking for good gospel music. There's a new artist out of the Bronx. His name is Rich Tolbert Jr. He has a live album out right now, which is, really, really like blessing me in this moment. And then one of my former clients, Erica Campbell, she's a one member of a duo called Mary Mary, but she's been solo for a while. She has a radio show, all that. She's been leaning into trying to blend her music with more like political stances, not so much like partisan stances, but trying to kind of bring people into that world. We do some work together with an organization called the Black Church Pack. And so she, I think, is working on some stuff that should be coming out soon. I know she had a single last year called Praying and Believing that she released at the same time as the George Floyd, uprising, and just trying to kind of help Christians understand that like having a political point of view is okay. And so I'll be looking forward to what she's coming out with.
Great. I'll be sure to check those out. I just personally, I knew I couldn't to go straight too far as a lover of music myself. And I would
I love it.
Definitely second the Tiny Desk recommendation. One of the very cool things about it is that they don't do repeat guests. So once you're in it, you're like, you can't get around and like unless there's nuances with that. But so you're always finding something new. So highly recommend that as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.
I also wanted to, because I realized I didn't ask this when we were talking about Double Love explicitly, but you mentioned it kind of in the in your publicist talk. What does double love mean? What double love is there? Like why is it called that? Yeah,
so funny enough, it's not even like a super deep reason. We're named after the double love experience commandment, the double love commandment, excuse me. Okay. And so the double love commandment shows up in 3 of the 4 gospels. We use Matthew's version of the gospel. So you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as you love yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. It's found in 3 of the 4 gospels. It's also a part of the Shema in the Old Testament. And so I actually, I had an opportunity to speak at the Brooklyn Borough President's event last Christmas. They allowed me to speak about double love, which was great. If you're not familiar with New York City, we're five boroughs make up New York City: Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, and Manhattan. And so while we have a New York City mayor, every borough has a borough president, which is basically like the mayor of the borough. And so the Brooklyn Borough President invited me to speak about double love, which was great. And so what I love about it is it allows me to kind of have an interfaith connection with folks, because when I spoke about it at the borough president's office, I referenced, both Jewish folks as well as Christians, hold the first part of this clause as a really sacred text. And so for us, because scripture says on this hang all the law and the prophets, we really see that as, through this, if you can get this right, every other command that God gives, every other law, every other thing that we're supposed to do, if you can read it through this prism of loving God with your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself, you're in good shape. Right. And so our whole endeavor is to see church through the lens of the double love commandment that Christ gives. And so that's the functional arm of it. The other part of it is, I'm a YDS alum, faith and intellect. Right. So I love the God with all your mind, love God with all your mind clause of the double love commandment, because so many folks get shunned from church culture when they have questions, when they have pushback, when they've done their own bit of research and like senior clergy can't handle it, they usually get pushed out, right? And so we really try to have space for folks to bring their full self. And that may mean like we get challenged, and we welcome that. And so, loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, we try to kind of do programming that aligns with all of that. Like, what does it look like for somebody to love God with their mind in this moment, love God with their soul in this moment, with their heart, et cetera, et cetera. So that is it's what organizes all the work that we do. Right. And so it just felt appropriate to let's just name ourselves that, because that's right. How core it is to the work that we want to do in the world. A funny story is a lot of people think it's because my husband and I do ministry together. And so they're like, oh, y'all are in love, double pastors. Like, that's it, right? And I'm always like sad to tell them, like, it's actually not it. But so many folks think that that's what it is. I just let that ride too. I'm like, oh, that could be a double entendre we didn't expect. So, but it's absolutely about the scripture and not about Andrew and me, even though sometimes folks think that it might be, and we let it ride.
Thank you so much for explaining, because I know when I was first kind of Googled it online, and I was like, this sounds like a concert, like the double love experience coming to a
Definitely the experience word was like, we do want it to be an experience, and we toyed around with like different, like, some folks will use ministry, some folks will use, whatever. So really we're the Double Love Experience Church. The funny thing is I didn't put the word church on any of our branding in the beginning and I just haven't come back to change it. So all of our branding says Double Love Experience. Nothing says Double Love Experience Church.
Right.
But yes, Double Love Experience Church.
And I noticed at the beginning you mentioned like the DLE, like deal. So like it's baked in now.
I know. It has taken on a life of its own, but you love that. You kind of like, you put something in the earth and you kind of see what it does. That's what it did.
So we're nearing the end, but so I have a few more questions that I want to ask you. So this interview series, Transformational Leadership in a Turbulent Time, I was wondering, how have you been navigating these turbulent times personally, and what do you look to when you need to take care of yourself and find that kind of self-healing, self-care that I think a lot more people, at least in kind of popular narratives, have been looking towards or exploring in the past several months, in the past year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, no question, it has been a turbulent year. For the world, not even just the nation, with COVID-19 ravaging so many communities. And so, in March of 2020, when the impact of COVID became real, we shut down in-person services really early. I think our last in-person service, if my memory serves correct, was March 8th, 2020. And it was tough because, as a new church, for context, our church, the first year, 2019 to 2020, October 19, October 20, was a preview year for us. So we had just gotten into weekly services. Sure. And, 3 months later, here comes a pandemic, right? So boom, turbulent times, right? Just like, what are we doing now? We spent all this time building what we thought was a firm foundation to be in person weekly, and then that's not an option, right? Even making the decision of like when to pull the plug, right? Turbulent times of like, when do you decide not to be in person? When do you, we're still new. So are we small enough to risk it? Are we not? All those things. I ended up being asked to be on New York City Mayor de Blasio's COVID-19 like task force. And there were 40 faith leaders, right? Just 40 for a city as large as New York City. And so then I'm in weekly meetings with them, and we're all like, just, trying to decide like what's best. And, the city is like, hey, like as faith leaders, you all can say things in a different way. Because what was happening is in this turbulent time, people were really trying to figure out like, what does my faith have to say to this moment? Mm-hmm. Am I supposed to believe that because I'm a person of faith, God will protect me regardless? So let me just go on about my business. Am I supposed to believe that, again, loving God with my mind, God has given me, access to information. So my mind should be informing me and telling me that let's be wise, let's be safe. But people really were unsure. And in the beginning, New York was the epicenter for at least 6 weeks. And unfortunately, what brought people into awareness is that we began to lose several pastors. I mean, there was one period where I felt like I was learning about a New York City pastor dying from COVID every day, sometimes twice a day. It wasn't until the leadership began dying, unfortunately, that a lot of folks in the city got it and understood it. Those are turbulent times. Because what do you do with that, right? These are the clergy who were like, I'm still going to believe God, and putting on their vestments and still anointing people by hand and still serving communion and still doing these things, which seems like it would be an admirable thing. But, at the time, everyone was trying to figure out, how serious is this? How long is it going to last? Turbulent times, right? And so I think that one of the things that I really came to believe about the moment. I was serving with the mayor on this task force, trying to lead our church plan, our new church that was excited about being together, and now we had to separate. I'm currently in a DMin program, and so we're doing like our all of our stuff online now, and having those conversations, and just seeing everyone trying to figure out unprecedented experiences. What I took away from that moment was that the best way to lead through turbulent times is to acknowledge that the times are turbulent. Period. Most of the leaders who tried to act like, don't worry, we got it under control, don't worry about it, those were the leaders that led their folks astray. And I don't say this in judgment, because astray meant death. It wasn't like, it was death, right? But there were certain leaders who had been so programmed, because I'm the leader, I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. I'm supposed to have a plan. I'm supposed to be able to say, this is what we're doing. This turbulent time did not afford that, right? So the folks, the leaders who are willing to say, these times are turbulent, I don't have a master plan, and this plan that I'm giving you may change. That was the best way to lead. So I did a video for my congregation early March, and I said, this video is dated March 15th. As of now, with the information that we know, this is what we're doing. I came back to another video. This video is dated March, blah, 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 blah. This video is dated, and really helping people to understand that this is a scenario where things may change daily. And so we actually started a segment in our church called News You Can Use, where we had one of our team members literally every Sunday in service before the sermon, he would talk about whatever people need to know for the virus. Like, he would say, he was telling folks to get masks before it was mandatory. He was telling folks like everything, like he was just giving them information. And that was the other thing too. In turbulent times, the pastor doesn't have to know everything. Like, empower the congregants and empower the relationships that you have. And for me, it was important for me not to try to be their mouthpiece, but to bring them to our congregation. So we had a medical doctor who was on our launch team. I brought him in front of our congregation and was like, Dr. Matt is going to tell y'all what's happening in the hospitals right now. My community engagement guy, like Ken, is going to tell you all what's happening in the streets right now. Right. And so we would empower them. And we had so many meetings with them just to make sure that they were being supported and pastoring them while they're in the belly of it. Right. So turbulent times call for, I believe, first of all, acknowledging that the times are turbulent, period. Second of all, freeing yourself of having to be the one who is, again, the exception, getting rid of those exceptions. You are the one who is tasked with the responsibility to lead, but you're also living through what everyone else is living through. And you have to give space for that duality, I believe, in turbulent times. And so, here we are almost a year into this pandemic, and the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? They're talking about a more dominant, more aggressive strand and all of these things, right? At the same time that people are trying to re-enter. Well, we're still in turbulent times. Even though we're all tired of being in this mode of restriction, we've got to function in a way that mirrors the times. You can't just, I want to be done with this pandemic, so I'm going to act like it's done. You can't do that, And so I think that has been the biggest takeaway for me. And it has been a journey. It has been a battle. Being a church planter in general is a lot of work. Being a church planter when you can't even touch your folks, right? It's insane. But also there's a lot of possibilities in this moment, and I wrote an article about this in Duke's Leadership Journal a couple months ago, in December. And I wrote that there are so many new possibilities that can emerge from this. And trust and believe, there's some people somewhere who have already stumbled across like newness, right? And so like in turbulent times, keep your eyes open for what's possible now. that wasn't before. Because even with catastrophe and chaos, back in my PR hat, publicists say, don't waste a crisis, right? In every crisis, there's a moment where people are looking to you differently, where people are more open to new information, where people are more open and more aware of, okay, things could be different. Things are different, right? Look at this work from home culture, right? Americans would have never lasted this long working from home and not, but these conditions required it. And now folks are looking at, well, do I need to spend that much money on a lease every year if I can be just as productive, if not more, without it? There are MDiv programs who would never consider online that are now offering hybrid programs because they've been forced into online education. And now people who wouldn't have been able to take off 3 years of their life and move across the country can now, you can live in Seattle and go to YDS, right? So there's all these things. So I think that turbulent times require first acknowledging that the times are turbulent, not trying to get ahead of yourself beyond the plan that you have, because it's actually not comforting to your folks if you give them a plan that you suggest is kind of airtight and then it's not. It's much better to just say, we're going to walk this journey together. And it's my responsibility to cover you in prayer. It's my responsibility to do my due diligence. It's my responsibility to get professionals in front of you, experts in front of you, to update you as the information comes. But I cannot predict when this pandemic is going to end, right? You got a lot of folks doing false predictions that got them in trouble. So that's what I would say.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. One final question. I know it's already been a good number of times, but I want to get to this. So your career has been built on taking new steps into this unknown, right? So from first going from marketing to publicizing, and then from that to ministry, and then into church plants. I know that's how I felt coming into YDS. This was a new thing for me, and I'm sure that for a lot of my peers, it's the same. And then, as we're graduating into a new world, we don't know where we're going. There's this whole newness. So really quickly, just one piece of advice, kind of something you would say to that about stepping into this unknown, into something.
Yeah, I would say that nobody's journey is linear. So, we like to say, people like went to school, got the degree, got the job, then got promoted, and really like nobody's life is that simple. Like you can read somebody's bio and their resume and assume that it was, a linear journey. But most people, like if you talk to them, they didn't expect to land where they landed. They had no idea that like this catastrophe would turn into this possibility. There's folks who got fired and thought it was the worst thing that happened to them and ended up being the best thing that happened to them, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I would just encourage you all, number one, to be open to where your journey takes you. Like take the best opportunity in front of you at the time. You may not be able to figure out how is it going to connect, but if it's an opportunity that's a good one that you believe is generative, go into it. And you don't have to have the next 20 years planned out. Just see what that opportunity affords. And I would say always keep your eyes open, while you're in certain scenarios and circumstances. Still be just aware, like pay attention to your own like heart. Like, is your heart in it? Is it fulfilling you? Is it draining you? Not everything that you're good at is work that fulfills you. Sometimes stuff that you're good at can actually drain you. So do you want to build a lifetime around something that drains you just because you're good at it? No. I would say no. So, just like, I think it's important to, like you said, you are graduating into the unknown. But there's still like, the ways in which we get certain things accomplished obviously have had to change because of the pandemic, but the needs are still there.
Sure.
Right. So what does it look like to still be true to the needs that you've like trained for in response to? And it's really like more so like, what are the means of my response? Like the way that I respond has to look different in this condition. But if I'm called to this work, then there's going to be some way that it shows up. And it's really just like, looking for, what are those ways? But yeah, nobody's journey is linear. Pandemic or not, nobody's journey is linear. Just read anybody's memoir. And they're honest, and you'll see that it was not a linear journey, regardless of what they said.
Well, Pastor Gabby, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you so much for sharing so much about your life. I'm definitely going to go look up those artists now and listen to something.
Yes, you must.
During the rest of the day. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you to all of you who are watching this and have stuck to the end with us.
Yes, thank you guys. And thank you so much, Jonathan. This was so much fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you.